Hello friends, welcome back, or if you are new here, welcome. There's something about these early fall mornings when it's still dark outside when you wake up. It just seems so cozy. So I lit a candle and I poured myself some coffee while I enjoyed the thunderstorm outside. I'm still waiting for the kids to wake up. That's one thing that's kind of nice about these mornings is it's really not that early, but it's dark outside so they sleep a little longer. I'm getting the morning started by making some sandwich bread. I just recently started making this bread, but my family really enjoys it, and they've been going through the loaves like crazy. My mom's also swinging by later this afternoon, so I wanted to make a couple loaves in case she wanted to bring some home with her. I mentioned in my last video how my oldest son is fighting a bit of a stomach bug right now. We've had this stomach bug going around our family for about a week now, but my oldest son, he's just now starting to get over it, but he's still eating very simple meals. So I am just going to give him some butter bread, and he wanted a little bit of honey on it. So that's what I'm making for him here. I feel like as a mom, one of the harder things to go through is when your kids are sick. My son is about to turn 15, and even though he's about to turn 15, I still baby them kind of when they're sick. I don't know if that's just a mom thing or if it's just me, but I love being able to still take care of him even though he is older. I also tend to make a lot of the same comfort foods from when I was a kid and I was sick. I make those for my family when they're sick a lot. So I made some goulash the other night. Not sure if you're familiar with it. And I know that different parts of the world, it can be different. But ours is mostly like a soup with noodles, tomatoes, tomato juice. It's like a tomato soup with noodles and hamburger and vegetables. So I made that for him because that was always a comfort thing for me when I was a child. And so I kind of pass that tradition on. And when my kids are sick, I make it for them too. This sandwich bread that I'm making is made with yeast, but I do need to start my sourdough starter again. I had one a couple months back and I just got too busy with life and it was all bad and gross. So um, I want to start that back up again. One thing that I have struggled with sourdough is my house gets very cold when the weather starts dropping and getting colder. So I have a hard time starting one. It usually takes quite a while, and I tend to start them when the weather is warmer outside. So I really need to get on that before the weather starts to cool down more. But also, I find the timing on sourdough difficult for my life right now. So it's kind of a battle. I really want to do sourdough. I found some really great recipes that I like, my family really enjoys, but the time I feel like is very hard to remember for me. So if you have any suggestions for time management, which seems to be my biggest problem with sourdough recipes, please let me know. But that seems to be the biggest struggle for me. So this bread, I am using yeast because I don't have the sourdough yet. I looked outside and I saw how the sunbeams were shining through the clouds, I thought it looked so pretty, and it kind of reminded me of my son just looking down and saying hello, so I wanted to share that with you. If you've seen my previous videos, you will know that we homeschool our 4 kids, and Theo is learning sight words. So this is a game that we play. We'll put a bunch of sight words on cards and we put them around the house. And then my son Lincoln will say a sight word, and Theo then has to walk to it. And sometimes we hop, sometimes we dance to them. They both absolutely love playing it. So that's what he's doing there. While the kids are finishing up school, I am starting on lunch. I'm just going to throw some chicken in the oven and we're going to do chicken wraps for lunch. This is something my kids really enjoy. And I always feel whenever I'm watching myself during editing, whenever I am seasoning things, I feel like it looks like I'm putting so much on. But I promise you, it is not a lot. I mean, it is a lot when you look at it, but I shred the chicken and I debone it. So when you shred it and you're kind of mixing it all up, it all meshes very well. And I promise you, it is not overbearing. But I always look at it whenever I'm editing and I'm like, wow, that is a ton of seasoning. It just looks like that. I promise you, it is not that bad. I usually watch another YouTube show or I will listen to a podcast while I'm washing dishes, but my boys love Halloween music year round pretty much. And since we're so close to Halloween, they were blaring it. So that is what I was listening to. I had the luxury of listening to Halloween music at a very high volume, and my boys were just singing and dancing. They love Halloween music. So right after Halloween, though, we are the family that immediately switches over to Christmas. So after listening to Halloween music for months and months and months, we will then switch to Christmas. And as soon as January hits, I will have to plead with my 7-year-old to have somewhat of normalcy and listen to normal music for a little while before we start with the Halloween music again. I would ask if this is normal for other people, but I don't think it is. It's just part of his character. He's a funny little guy, and he loves his Halloween music. And for anybody wondering, we do have a dishwasher. I do prefer to wash dishes by hand sometimes. And then also our dishwasher kind of has a mind of its own. Sometimes it works good and sometimes it doesn't. So I just kind of skip that whole process and will do it by hand if I have time. There is something about these fall days when it's rainy outside and you just want to curl up with a book. I love a good apple scented candle. They are my absolute favorite, along with the tea scented. I like tea candles and apple scented candles. But this was an apple scented candle and it just felt like fall when I lit it. I've had this cake that I'm making now on my list of things to make for the last couple weeks now. It's just a simple vanilla cake with a chocolate frosting. This is the first time I'm making it, but it's a very simple cake and it turns out delicious. I try not to buy a ton of baked goods and snacks and stuff like that. I do buy snacks for the kids, but I really try to be minimal and I space them out. So if you see like a grocery haul, it will appear like we have a lot of snacks, but most of the time it is for several weeks at a time. During each week, I try to make one cake or a batch of cookies or a pie, something like that, that the kids can have for dessert if they'd like throughout the week. So I try to do that. That way I know what's going into their food, I know what they're eating, and it just makes me feel a little better. The name of this cake is Dianette's cake. Dianette was the lady that made this cake. So I will put the recipe in the description box below if you would like to try it also. If you do decide to make this cake, I do suggest using parchment paper at the bottom of the baking dish. I heavily greased this baking dish and the cake still stuck quite a bit to the bottom. So I suggest putting a small piece of parchment paper at the bottom of it so it doesn't stick. Or if you have other tips for that, I would love to hear them. But my cake did end up sticking a little bit, and so next time I will be using the parchment paper. The bread is done with its first rise, so I am just going to roll them out and separate them into two separate loaves, and then I will do a second rise before I put them in the oven. I think one of my favorite parts about baking homemade bread is the smell. I love the smell. I did not grow up with my mom baking a lot, or I don't think she ever made homemade bread, but so I'm not familiar with that scent. But now that I've been making it for quite a while now, probably a year or two, I've been making bread for my family, and that is my favorite part. I love how the house just fills with that bread smell. It's amazing. One of the best scents, I swear. I'm slicing up this loaf of bread and then I'll wrap it, and my mom will pick it up when she comes over this afternoon. But I have not had to buy store-bought bread for the last couple weeks since finding this recipe, which I love that. The recipe that I make makes two loaves, and we use them for basically everything from toast to just butter bread or sandwiches. And then when it starts to get a little too hard, I will crumble it up and make breadcrumbs. And then if I don't have a recipe that I'm using the breadcrumbs for right away, I'll put them in the freezer for later. I believe I already shared this recipe on a different video, but I'll go ahead and include it in the description box below for you if you want to make it too. This chocolate frosting was incredible. It was perfectly fluffy, and it was probably one of my new favorites. And little hands also thought it was their favorite. They kept sneaking their fingers into the bowl and on the spatula to have a taste. We are heading out this evening to go to some fall festivities in town, so I'm making a quick dinner. I already had some chicken from earlier, so I took the remainder of that, and I had some bone broth going on the stove. So I put those in with some vegetables, and I am doing a crust to make like a pot pie. There's not going to be a bottom to the pot pie. I'm just going to put the vegetables and the cream sauce and the chicken into a cast iron skillet, and then I'm going to put the pie crust over top, and then I will put it in the oven and bake before we leave. This dinner is a perfect fall staple. It is so easy, comes together so quick, so it makes a really great middle of the week meal when you have a busy schedule, and my entire family enjoyed this meal. I forgot to add, I did also put an egg wash over both of the pot pies to give that crust a nice brown color. But that's all I have for you today. Thank you so much for hanging out with me on this peaceful, rainy fall day. I hope you have a great rest of your day. I'll see you next time. Bye.